So my girlfriend's really into Bravo
Oh
shows,
no.
and I never really used to watch any of this stuff. And it's a nice escape from real life, and just I don't have a lot of drama in my life. It's nice to see other people going through a lot of drama. It's just entertaining.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Without a Roadmap. This is the show for product people who don't have all the answers. We plan to tell the stories of product folks who get the job done but are still figuring it out. My name is Jonas.
My name is Cam. Jonas and I are both PMs at Parlor. Today we're joined by Joel. So Joel, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the good people out there?
Hey everyone, my name is Joel Alonzo. I'm a product manager at a subsidiary of Dell called Boomi. It's on what we call intelligence, basically AI. I'm happy to be here.
Actually, interesting story. Joel's the first non-networked guest on the show. So previously, just about everybody that we've had on the show has come in through, our personal network, friends of friends, things of that nature. So Joel actually found the show organically. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you stumbled upon us. You were actually one of the first comments that we received on YouTube. And it meant a lot to hear that there was somebody out there that found this as interesting.
It was super exciting to see.
Yeah, I can't remember. You know how you get into like these rabbit holes with YouTube?
Yeah.
All of a sudden I saw your video, and my first reaction was like, oh my God, like a diverse group of people talking about product. Like I gotta give them at least a shout out, even if this like goes down in flames and it's terrible. Like at least they're out there, they're trying to have that conversation. And I just decided to just comment, and I never comment on YouTube videos because
Me neither.
I go down
Yeah.
a whole other directions, but I really felt to. And look where we are now.
Wow. That means a lot, knowing that it's not like you're somebody who's out there commenting on every video, because there are those people. And shout out to them too, the people who just threw a nice job, guys, onto the video, but never followed
Right.
up. So yeah, but I think, that speaks to kind of your interest in kind of continuing to grow as a PM, because you're out there clearly. Like YouTube recommended us because you're probably deep in the depths of product YouTube. So I'm love to learn a little bit more about your like progression into product. Maybe where you started and how you landed at your role now at Boomi.
Yeah. So I've been with Boomi for around 7 years now. I didn't come into the company to be a product manager. Oddly enough, when I came in, I think me and my manager, he's one of the directors of product, we came in at the same time. And so the company was really young, really starting to grow into that, establishing, proper product roles. And, spent some time in engineering as a QA engineer. I really, really enjoyed that job, just working with the engineers, just learning more about like process and like agile. And like, I was just a sponge, just learning so much about software development. And
can you talk a little bit about what a QA
yeah.
engineer does? Is like, because I QA, I'm first line of defense when it comes to QA as a product manager, and that's kind of been my experience. So like, what's a QA engineer? Like, what's your role?
Yeah. So when we are fairly young, so our group was fairly small, but in a nutshell, you're making sure that the software works as expected, right? You have your story, right? And if it's properly written, you have some acceptance criteria, some end result that you're trying to achieve. And as a QA engineer, the software engineer is coding to that objective. But as a quality engineer, it's not only your job to make sure that that part of the puzzle works, but how does it connect to the broader product? How does the end-to-end work? And then automate that so that when you put it out there in production, you have some changes made later on. You have some regression tests running. to ensure that you're not breaking any customers. We have like 9.99% uptime, that SLA that we have to adhere to. So really, it's super important that we don't break customers, right? I mean, that's number one. So so you're just repeating that, and then as the company grows, as the product grows, you're just having to scale that, right? You need more automation. You need better test data. So it's a fun job. I think a little bit less. Well, it is stressful in some ways because if something breaks and slips through the cracks, and they're like, who done
that's on you.
Who missed that one? And I'll be honest, I missed one or two things.
No one's perfect.
You have a finite number of test cases, and there's those edge cases that you're like, oh, no one's ever gonna hit that. And then there's always that one customer that's doing all crazy things, and they hit it, right? So
I have 1,000 tabs open at one time.
Our VP of engineering loves to say, "Don't browse like an asshole while QAing." But that's important. We have to do that because somebody else is doing that, and you got to catch it so they have a good experience. So did you have a background in software development to get into that role, or did you kind of just figure it out as you went?
Yeah, I had no prior knowledge of software development. I came up through like IT and business systems. I was a systems analyst at one point. But yeah, I just learned on the fly. I mean, I came in and just hit the ground running, and I'm a fast learner for the most part. I mean, just throw me in any situation and I'll figure it out. I don't need to know everything exhaustively, but I'll just need to know how do I do my job and how do I do it well? And once I master that, then I can, add value to the company. And, I think I was fairly successful in that. And I do miss, being in engineering. It's funny. A lot of the senior developers always like, so when are you coming back to QA? Because they're like, so how's this product management thing going? Because we could really use you. And, it's nice to hear that.
Yeah. So after QA engineer, where did you land?
Yeah, so that's when I started having conversations with the person that was leading product at the time. Like, hey, I'm curious about this. What do you think if I gave it a shot? He gave me a recommendation to read the Inspire book by Marty Kagan, and he's like, this is what I view product management as, and if that's something that you think you can do, and just we'll give you a shot. I mean, you're already here, the product, so that's the hardest part as a product manager, especially come from the outside. You have to learn the product, and that can take forever. Mm-hmm. So I felt like I had a leg up, and then it was just kind of waiting, like, what am I going to work on, right? And that took a little bit of time because he wanted me to really focus on something that was unique, and I give credit to this person because I think he really challenged me to think outside the box and to really just explore everything. Like it was almost like I was starting my own little company, and it really allowed me to be creative in ways that I didn't really think that I was that creative, right? And kind of work my way up in knowledge from that point on, and just looking at classes and what else do I need to learn, and just learning from different perspectives, because that's like, if you go like hyper focus on like, oh, I'm just going to learn from this book, then you're just becoming like every other product manager, right? I want more perspectives from different people, like from different industries, different company sizes, because all their experiences matter, because not everyone, there's no silver bullet in learning product management.
Yeah. That's why we hope that this podcast like kind of sheds light on that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, this podcast has exposed us to like new ways of thinking, because everybody thinks differently. Everyone operates in product management differently. So having the chance and the platform to talk to other people in product, and also other people in different areas of the company, so customer success, marketing, and sales, and upcoming episode on growth, like it just helps us just think through all the ways that a product could be built, how it impacts everything else, and just all things product.
Exactly.
Hmm. Yeah. So in that process, like it sounds kind of jarring to be like thrown into a product position without having like had any background or knowledge in the space. So like, what did you do to get yourself ready for that? You know, especially with all that leeway, you know, it sounded like you were pretty like kind of just running free on your own.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the first thing I did, um, I was like, I need some, I know what product manager does. I interact with one day to day, but like, what does a good product manager do? And how do I become a good product manager? And, I started looking at classes. I looked at like product school, and General Assembly. And a lot of these were in like the New York area. So Boomi is based out in the Philadelphia area, and there wasn't really much there at all. And was like, I'm not going to go take the train to New York City every week to take a class. That it's just exhausting. Number one, it's super expensive to take the train every
Yeah.
week. So yeah, so I found a class on General Assembly, and it was like a 1 week intense boot camp. And I was like, all right, I want to go there, and I don't want to do it on the East Coast. I want to go on the West Coast. I want to experience different types of thinking. And I went there, and I really liked it. I like being surrounded with like-minded people, and just we're asking the same questions, even though they had already been product managers, which was very interesting to me. And it made me realize like no one really knows what they're doing, and they're trying their best to figure it out. And the number one asset is just other product managers, because you always think you're alone.
Yeah.
It's
Right,
like,
right.
I don't know what I'm doing. So let me
So,
ask
so
somebody else.
yeah, you mentioned that you wanted to go to West Coast to see like a different way of thinking. I'm originally from the West Coast, so I wonder if you've actually experienced like if there's a difference, because I don't know any PMs on the West Coast. My whole career has been on the East Coast so far.
Yeah, so at least the people that I've interacted with, I think on the West Coast, you're more willing to take risks, and you're more willing to chase like a moonshot, right? You have your moonshot vision and idea, and it can be this grand thing that may never really come to reality, but you're chasing it.
Hmm.
Whereas I find in the East Coast, you have your vision, yeah, but it's more grounded, and it's very like tactical, like very like Wall Street, like, oh, we're going to hit this milestone and check that, right? So, I mean, you don't, and the West Coast, it's just like you're just trying so hard to get there, and you might get there in different ways, or you may take the craziest U-turn and come to some crazy new product or idea, a new vision. So it's just more in my thinking. I like that because I don't want to have a set roadmap forever. I want to experiment and try different things and see where that takes me and follow the conversation.
That's interesting. I think that kind of falls in line with how we think about like product vision at Parlor. Instead of like a really static roadmap, we have we follow the 3 horizon framework, which essentially, you know, it allows you to be a lot more flexible in the
Yeah.
general direction of your company, as long as you're making progression across 3 different horizons, kind of horizontally at the same time. And I think that does allow for more creativity kind of in the day to day, and especially at an early stage. When you're an early stage company, you have no clue which direction you're going to go tomorrow. Your product market fit is this idea that very few have actually achieved. So it's kind of just allows you that flexibility, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, going back to your original question was, after I was given an assignment of like, hey, this is where I want you to focus, it was really just like digging into that and establishing that vision, looking at data, and then going back to the businesses and like, hey, this is what, I think makes sense for us to do. And, a couple of years later, I'm still on that track.
Cool. Talk us through like your first big deliverable as a PM. Did it come like right away, or did you kind of build up and get some other small things out the door before, I don't know, you do like a redesign, like a big new product initiative for Boomi?
Yeah, so I think, oddly enough, as a new PM, I think my first real, it wasn't even, well, you could call it a product. It was deliverable, was this vision around AI for our product, right? We didn't even call it AI. It was just crowdsourcing, because we would crowdsource like metadata from the usage of our product. And just establishing that vision. And then, we had our first user conference ever as a company. And my boss was just like, I want you to create a video with the prototype that you did. I use Axure. I had never used Axure before, by the way. I was like, it was, I wish I could find it, because it was like pretty terrible.
I would love to see this.
And he's like, yeah, just refine it a bit and, put a video up, and we're going to announce this. This is going to be like the cool thing that we're going to announce as our working up to our new vision that we hadn't really thought through too much to that point. It was in this infancy there. And yeah, so, I got together with the video team, marketing team. I grabbed a super awesome, talented UX designer, Brian, just amazing guy. Like, what I built sucks. How do we make it a little bit better? And he took it to the next level, and it was great. I put together an outline for what this video was, how I wanted it to feel, even to like the music. I had an idea in my head, like I want when people watch this, I want them to feel like we're a enterprise software. Like, it's not that exciting, but I want them to feel excited. I want them to feel like I want that functionality. And music conveys a lot of emotion that you see in movies. And yeah, I mean, we launched it, we released it, and that was my big moment, if you will. And it wasn't even a product, but it was the start of a vision and future products to come. So it was really cool, but also a lot for a new product manager, because I went from like knowing nothing to just like, I felt like I had been in the industry for like, 3 years at that point.
Just thrown right in the deep end. Yeah.
It was that immediate thought leader.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the beautiful thing about being a PM at a startup, because you are just thrown at the deep end and forced to kind of like learn, like become a domain expertise in that industry, and kind of just like be able to prescribe solutions for problems that people have been dealing with for potentially decades, and you're like, oh god,
right.
So you jumping, I'm curious, what's like the update on that project that you launched years later? Did it how much has it changed? Did it actually end up going live?
Yeah. So after that, we got new priorities from leadership. So we had to kind of just put it on the side for now. And I've as a new product manager, I'm just like, hey, I'll play ball wherever you need me, right? I'm here to learn and do stuff. So I did a lot of more like security related functionality in our product, and things that were useful, but it wasn't like, it's like burning with like emotion about these things, but they had to be done for the good of the business. And then later on, my boss again grabbed me. He's like, hey, I need to go back and working on that vision and making it reality. And I basically stole a developer from one of my fellow PMs because he was a really talented developer, and I was like, I want him on my team, and I want him to start working on this. So we started like brainstorming, like what is the one thing that we could do. As more people got involved, things started to slow down a bit, because you have so many opinions, so many different directions you can go. But really what remained constant was this need to, all right, we can't just do AI with how our architecture is currently. We really need to start from the ground up and build this the right way. Because if we're talking about like developing so many features, you can't do it willy-nilly, right? Because it's not gonna scale later on. So I went back to like an engineering mindset. It's like, okay, what do we need to do to start building that framework, if you will? So the last couple of years has been building up that framework, making sure that we're compliant with security, data sovereignty, the whole gamut of things, working with legal. It's been a lot, but it's something that's necessary. And we're finally getting to that point where, we have a good amount of data that we can start adding more capabilities to the product that, might have another equal PM that's kind of running with a lot of these other features. So I've stepped back and become almost like the enabler PM, whereas I focus on the internal microservices and all these things. And he stepped up and handled working with the other PMs around identifying new use cases and talking to customers. So, but I'm still involved in the day to day. But again, I go wherever the need is, even though that's not really probably where I'm best at. I work really well at the high level. Just, let's just shoot for the moon and we'll figure out how to get there.
Right.
that's
you
what
talked
I have
about, yeah. You talked about when you first got into the product management, you just wanted to know, like, what is a good PM? So after a couple of years under your belt, what do you think is a good PM or a great PM? Like, what are your thoughts on that so far?
I think a couple of things have really stuck with me. One is really to just be curious about everything, because the more curious you are, it just leads you to different places. Because I was talking to a customer recently, and pitching to them this initiative that I'm working on, and then they start talking about a problem, but just in passing, and I'm like, oh well, let's. Like, I don't even remember what I was asking you about. Like, I'm going down that direction now because that seems like you have a real problem that I could maybe help you with. But it's just an opportunity at that point. I don't know, it's up to me and maybe taking it back to the team and figure out like, what are the options to solve this opportunity? It's not just like, here's the problem and give me the first way to solve it and then we're going to go with that. That's not how it works. So just being curious and exploring options, and then figuring out what the best approach is in conjunction with, like, if there's a user experience component to that, take that into account, because that is like one of the most important things.
Right.
Not the most important thing is make sure that user experience is buttoned down. So that's kind of number one that I've noticed. And the second would be really to find a way to inspire your team to really not need you very much. I thought that product managers had to know everything, had to have every answer. And we would get into these conversations doing discovery, and I'm like, honestly, I don't know. I don't know what the customer wants. All I know is that this opportunity is there and this is a problem. They're not going to tell me, like, I want this. It's up to us to figure out a unique way to solve that, right, in an innovative way. And the more information I could give them, the more I can make them feel empowered to make decisions. Really started working well, because I feel like the engineering team just runs itself. They're like, well, I have this epic. I know what it means in the roadmap, but I have all these new stories that came up in doing the work. They have the freedom to add them, right? And, if there's a priority question, like, how does this impact the roadmap? Is it because you found all these things that we need to push things out? Well, let's have that conversation, because obviously I don't need you creating more work just for the sake of creating more work. But I feel like the team is really empowered to do the right things. And that's really important, because the team that feels empowered creates better products, rather than just someone standing above them like, no, you need to implement this technology and this, and you need to do it by this date. Like, I'm here to learn from them as much as I'm there to provide them answers.
Yeah, I love that. That's kind of how I feel about, like, breaking down stories, like the less communication that's required, the better. And I think that's like an indication of like how well you did explaining the problem and your proposed solution. It's like, if you can be clear in how you communicate with your internal stakeholders, then like that's a sign of being a good PM. And that's kind of what I'm working on right now.
Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, again, coming from a technical background, there's been times where I was just like, well, why don't we do this? And I start proposing and solutioning technology. And I remember one of the architects was just like, what are you doing? Like,
That's my job.
Let us do our job. And I see a lot of other PMs do that. And not necessarily our company, but just in general, where you start solutioning, and that's not like, let people do the job that they're supposed to do. You do your job, they do their job, you work together to solve the problem. It's not up to you to do their job. Right.
Right. Everyone's on the same team. Everyone's trying to get the same thing done. So just let people do them pretty much.
Yeah, I trust them to make the right calls. Like, I trust anytime there's a question about user experience, I'm going to the expert and I'm going to take their opinion and their validation. Like, hey, this is what I think should happen. And, they'll give me their reasons. And I was like, yeah, I agree. You're the expert. You know this area more than I ever will. So I'm going to go with your suggestion. You are the expert. I'm trusting you. And that's how we work together. It's just building that trust all around. Because if they don't trust me, right, why would they want to do anything that I'm, leading? And likewise, if I don't trust them, like, that's a bad position to be in. If you don't trust your team to make the right calls, like, I hate to be that.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you you guys are a Dell subsidiary. I don't know if you're considered enterprise, but it's definitely, like, I think you mentioned you guys are in the hundreds in terms of employee size. It sounds like there's a lot of flexibility given that size in your role, in kind of the defining the product strategy and vision, and more so than I've expected or heard about in enterprise or just larger companies.
Yeah, I think I came in at a good time to be a product manager, because I think we hit a point where we really needed to reinvent ourselves as a company, as a product, and started looking at the next 3 to 5 years. And we had a really great leader come on, the West Coast guy, long hair, just cool guy. And he really started challenging us to think in that, like, we need a moonshot, right? And we might fall short of that, but we're striving to be this grand thing. And I think we all rallied around that and started really coming together to seeing how we could achieve that vision. And, it was an awesome time for me to come in as a new PM and just grow with that, because it really felt like we were still a startup. And then as we unveiled that vision, the company was growing. And now we've become like this almost enterprise level baby of another, monster enterprise. And, just working with the UX team and just talking to customers and just digging deeper into problems and just prototyping that and just telling that, that story map. And it was just an awesome time. And I learned so much about the right way to do things, where, again, we delivered on a vision that was the product, which we unveiled to our customer base. And it really just made us more successful than I thought we would ever be, because it was just an idea. It was a bet. Like, we're going to bet on this idea, and we validated it, so we're going to chase it now. And it might go badly, and we might pivot and make so many U-turns and circles and land somewhere else. But we're doing it. We're chasing it, and I think we're better perceived now as like an innovative company that's willing to take that risk, to be better.
Yeah, it's like, if you're well funded, then you can take a couple risks, and if it doesn't work out, then great. But it's funny, like, I heard you mention it, and so many people mention it at enterprise companies that, oh, my company has a startup feel. And enterprise companies are considered enterprise because they're successful enough to grow and gain market share, and so they did something right. But there's this transition to companies referring to themselves as startup feel, or having a startup feel. Like, why do you think that is? I feel like it's just a funny comparison that I see made, like, really often.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what a startup feel is. It's probably that entrepreneurial spirit, right? That you have freedom to take ideas from their infancy and execute on them. that to me is what I envision as a startup. Whereas the more enterprise you get, there's a lot more, not intentional roadblocks, but they're roadblocks, right? You have more legal stuff you need to worry about and all these things that really slow the process down. And I don't think a lot of people realize that if there's a lot of red tape in an enterprise level, and risks if they don't go as intended, their impact could be much more than at a smaller company where it's almost like it's okay at a startup to take a risk and maybe fail. Whereas in an enterprise, some enterprises, you take a risk and it fails, well, they're counting how much money you wasted potentially if they don't see it as a learning experience and innovating, right? So that's kind of the difference, in my opinion, anyways.
Yeah, it's like even though they do have the funding, there are, especially if they're a public company, stakeholders they're responsible for. But and maybe it's that they've just kind of found their niche and carved that out and know what they need, and innovation is no longer, it kind of has like a diminishing value at that stage, where it's like actually, or we can just go deeper in this space we know we're really good and kind of competent in. Whereas startups don't really have, like, what's the percentage of startups that actually make it to Series A? It's like something crazy, like infinitesimally small. So in order to make it to that stage, you do have to take a number of risks and kind of like, beat the odds. And that does, that involves, kind of stepping out of a comfort zone that, maybe an enterprise company doesn't need to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of my friends from college, he's a PM at a very large company, and they strictly build to what customers want the most. So they have an idea portal. Whatever has the most upvotes, they're going to build no matter what. Like there's no innovation. There's no thinking through like a new feature that could be game changing. They're just building to what is requested most. And that's it.
Well, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, maybe that's been working out for them.
It's like most things, right? You look at like Tesla and like, legacy automakers, right? People say like, hey, you could have done the same thing, but here comes a startup and it's just taking those risks. They don't care. Like, we'll burn however much money because we really believe in this. And now everyone's like, oh snap, like maybe we shouldn't have kept up the status quo. Maybe we should have taken the risk.
Yeah. I look at Skype. Like Skype had the biggest head start ever. Yeah, and this happens unfortunately, but then Zoom is the big player now. It's like everyone's talking about Zoom meetings, and Skype is kind of just in the background, like, oh, I'm still here. Don't forget about me.
Right.
Yeah, that's what happens when you stop innovating. However, I'm not sure like Zoom's really innovating. I don't. It's as we're recording this on their software. Sorry, Zoom. But it's there's still like I guess it's an enterprise software. It's as sexy as that can get.
Yeah.
So I know you spoke of working on AI products, and I think that being a PM with a little bit of background in kind of engineering, being able to work on AI sounds like something that would excite a lot of people. That's kind of like the new frontier. So I'm curious what product management looks like in kind of that space as it's still like developing so rapidly, changing every day, and like what are some of the unique things that you have to keep in mind to kind of successfully build products that integrate AI capabilities?
Yeah, so one of the very first things that in talking with our UX director was we need to make sure that what we build is there's limited bias in it. It's hard to say remove all bias because I don't think that's possible. But you want AI is a scary thing. So a lot of people, right? You mean your job, you're going to make your software so easy to use that you don't need a consultancy to help implement this and all these things. And that's what I'm thinking about because I've been that user using the product. So if the software is so good, does my job go away? So just you have that level of empathy and putting yourselves in the customer's shoes, even like a partner, not even a customer, just like someone that maybe resells your software, they might be looking at this like, oh, wow, this company is really investing in AI. What does that mean for us? So what we said, like, we put together these guiding principles for AI and start, build around those, right? We don't want to do AI because we're going to do AI, but it's really just meant to augment what our users were doing. It's really about like taking away the mundane tasks, repetitive things, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want you to have to click on something 5,000 times. That's stupid, right? Where we can automate and make your life easier so you're happier as a user, that's where we want to be. It's not always this like grand slam of like, oh, there's going to be the chat bot and like he's going to come and do all these things for you. That's not reality. The reality is that even the most mundane things that maybe selecting the field, if you can tell me how maybe there's a better way of doing something, I'm going to be so much happier as a customer because you're assisting me in doing my job better, not getting rid of it. So that's something that, we always have to keep in mind. And as a PM from like day-to-day, like PM things, data science, AI is really hard because you have, your opportunity and you're looking at ways to solve that. But, the data is telling you one thing, and you're going to run an experiment and see where you land, but it may fail. There's a lot of failure in data science AI. You may not have enough data. You might need to create new data. It might not be feasible to create new data. So what was this great idea that people were like rallying around, like, oh yeah, that sounds great. We're gonna be awesome and super innovative. It's like, hey guys, sorry, we actually can't do that. Yeah, and that's hard. And it wasn't because of like hey, it's just gonna take too long. It's just like there's no way to do that right now. So there's a lot more experimentation in data science AI. And I don't know that people are always comfortable in that experimentation because the roadmap for AI and data science is much more dynamic. And you're trying out there, or you're doing experiments and it may not work, or it may be cost prohibitive. So you're going to step back. Okay, what's the next thing? So you have to really do it on the front end, right? Do a lot of discovery with your data scientists. Okay, is this feasible? Can we actually do it technically? Is the data there, right? Great. Let's validate this. So you really have to move faster. Otherwise, you're wasting a lot of time. So it's much more challenging, in my opinion, in this field because as companies and leaders, they want predictability. They want a roadmap. Like, yes, Q3, I'm expecting that. But when you get into it, you're digging into data. Maybe it's not going to be Q3. Maybe it's never now. And I think it's hard for leaders to understand everything that goes into this field because it's not always all cut and dry. You're not just writing some Java. That's it.
Right. And as a product manager, it's your job to know when, and it's a good thing when you're able to end something prematurely rather than put more resources into it with the understanding there's a chance it might not, produce the results that are intended. So that's something I'm sure you've had to get comfortable with.
Yeah, it's a tough conversation to have, right? Because they're like, oh, what am I getting from all this investment? And it's not always that easy. Because you may get something else that you weren't anticipating, right? Because you're looking at the data, maybe you uncovered a problem that the customers hadn't even told you about, and that's where I'd rather be, right? I want to uncover things that no one's talked to me about, right? So I can like wow and surprise the customer rather than like always listening to what they want. Well, they think they want, anyways. But yeah, I think that's a better place to be. But that takes a lot of time in some cases, and it takes a lot of experimentation, a lot of risk in that.
And while we have you, I feel like there's an interesting opportunity to talk about something in AI that I think a lot of people are interested in. It's kind of how you control for the people's the bias of the people building AI in the actual AI itself. Like, you know, there's humans that are like writing this code, and you know, they have you know, kind of a unique understanding of how they think it should work. And you know, as a product manager, how can you account for that when you're kind of directing a team? You know, is it a lot of communication, getting everybody on board of kind of the strategy and the vision?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why from the start you know, and I always go back to user experience, because for me, I can architect, I can do whatever behind the scenes, but without that strong user experience, it doesn't really mean anything. And I think it always goes back to those principles that we can always point to. So if I'm unsure, we're working on a feature that, you know, I'm unsure about how this would, you know, how the customer would perceive this based on what we're trying to do. You know, you can just remind yourself like, okay, this is what I should be doing, and just start asking questions and just challenge the team to think of it in a different way, right? And you might need to go and get more information. Maybe you need to talk to a bigger pool of customers, more diverse group of customers. Maybe you need to talk internally, get some people internally that will put a second eyes on what you're working on. Like, yeah, this is what I think, right? Because, you know, different areas of the business have totally different perspectives, and they might bring ones that you never really accounted for. So it's just like that diversity is not just about like, oh, we want to, you know, make sure we hire, you know, diversely, you know, brown, you know, whatever, right? It's also about getting that perspective into your product as much as possible, like constantly, because I'm going to miss some things, right? So let me work with some other groups that might maybe fill that gap a little bit. So it's just asking more questions, challenging the team to think differently, and hoping that we make the right decision. Because I don't think we're always going to get it right, and you know, somebody's always going to get upset whenever you do something. It's just how do you minimize that as much as possible?
Mm. Yeah, no, super interesting. Well, I think that's our time. Really, really thankful having you on, Joel. It's been great to get to know you over the last week or two, and appreciate you being a, you know, a long time listener and
A day one listener.
Yeah, it's like our first day one. So really great to have you on, and you know, hope that you're doing well over there, and regardless of everything going on in this world, you're able to kind of power through, keep it moving, and keep building great products.
Yeah, same here, guys. I really appreciate it. You know, stay safe if you're going to go out there and protest or anything. And I hope you have a good rest of the week. I'm off today. I'm in birthday mode.
It's your birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Oh no.
I was gonna make a big deal out of it.
Oh man. And he gave us a time on his birthday. All right, everybody listening, please you know, say happy birthday, Joel, in your mind.
Thanks, guys.
Well, I hope this was like a nice little break to on your birthday then.
Yeah, for sure. I think a couple hours gonna be eating and having a drink or two or 4.
That's awesome.